What I've got here with me is the very latest of the Pirelli Supercorsa tyres. This is the SP V4. Now, I've grabbed this particular tyre, both a front and rear one, to run a bit of an experiment on Bob here. The reason I'm doing that, or I chose this particular tyre, is it comes out in a particular configuration that I'll mention in a second. But first of all, let me just talk about this tyre. We've got Metzeler tyres on the bike at the moment, and I want to go this particular Pirelli version because of the size of the tyre specifically. The tyre on the back that we've got here at the moment is a 255 by 17. So basically what that means is it's 200 millimeters wide in width, and the profile of that tyre is 55% of that width. So what that means is it's a 200 millimeter wide tyre and it has a 110 millimeter profile. Now this particular tyre is a 200 by 60 17 inch, which means it's 200 mil wide, so it's the same width as the Metzeler here, but it has a 60% profile, which means instead of it being 110 mil, as what we've got on the 200 by 55, it's 120 mil. So it's an additional 10 mil higher in its profile. Now the reason for that, or the benefits of that, is that it changes the profile, the shape of that particular tyre, and it gives you apparently more edge grip. So a little bit higher here, kind of flattens it a little bit here, and you get a better edge grip. And that's basically what people have been telling me about this particular tyre. Now we've never measured that or compared it, but we're going to run a little bit of an experiment. We're going to put this matching pair of Pirelli SP Supercorsas onto Bob, and going to replace these Metzeler tyres that we've got on here. Now, what that will mean is we're going to go from 120/70 on the front and a 255 on the rear to the same on the front, another 120 by 70, which is the Pirelli Supercorsa SP, but the rear will be different. The rear will be the 260. And now, what that's going to mean ultimately is it's going to lift the back of the bike a little bit. It's not going to lift the bike above the swing arm, but it's basically going to have the tyre slightly with a slightly higher radius. It's going to lift the center of the axle here a little bit higher, and it could be anything up to 10 millimeters, which is going to change the geometry of the motorcycle. A little bit of lift at the back, right, is effectively steepening the rake at the front, which reduces the trail, and it's going to turn in a different way. Now, I'm not an expert on this, and what I'm going to do is bring on board some people I know. I'm going to talk to them about the particular configuration here. But nothing to it but to make some measurements, and then we're going to whack this tyre on here. Okay, we've got the 260 Pirelli on the back now, and we've increased the pressure to 26 psi just so that it matches the baseline that we utilised in the Metzeler 200 by 55. So all we're going to do is measure the height from the ground to the axle, so nice and perpendicular. Right. And then we've got both heights recorded here, so what we can see is that the Pirelli 200 by 60 is 326.5 millimeters from the ground to the center of the axle. The 200 by 55 Metzeler at the same air pressure of 26 psi was 318.5 millimeters. So effectively what's happened is the axle is actually 8 millimeters higher than the Metzeler tyre or the 200 by 55. So effectively we've lifted the bike by 8 millimeters. So that does affect the geometry of the motorcycle, and it can affect the handling. So it'll be interesting to see how it actually rides. What we're going to do is ride it in this configuration, and then what I am going to do is have a bit of a play with preload, and then also drop the front forks around about 3 millimeters down through the triple clamp. There is a small amount available at the front of this motorcycle, so I'm actually going to use that up, and that would effectively raise the front by 3 mil or so. So the difference may be only 5 millimeters, so it's going to be interesting. All I want to do is just go and ride this thing and have a bit of fun with it, so let's do that. We're back from the ride, as you can see, and I've got to say the result that we experienced was a little bit different than what I expected. I had this expectation that by lifting at the back 8mm in this particular case, that the change in the geometry at the front end would be significant enough that I would feel it, you know, and the bike would feel a bit twitchy, or it'd want to turn a little fast and even feel like it's collapsing or folding underneath the front. But I was pleasantly surprised because it was nothing like that. In fact, it improved the overall handling of this motorcycle, which is intriguing to me because it's not what I expected. Now, the configuration of it is the forks are exactly where they were when we bought the motorcycle, so that's one ring showing above the triple clamp, which is the standard for these 2015, 2016 models, which is about 3mm protrusion above the triple clamp. I'm definitely going to push that down and give it a ride and see what that feels like with it flush. So that'll be a 3mm push down or lift up at the front. The other part about the configuration of this one is I'm about 82 kilos. With the sag setting on this, we'd previously set the rider sag to exactly what it should be according to manufacturer specs. And in this case, what we did was we backed the preload out 2 turns at the rear, and we increased the preload 2 turns at the front. And I thought that might, you know, that may offset it a little bit, and I was interested to see what that would produce in terms of feel. But it was perfect. It was just a brilliant feel. It held a very tight line. It never felt like it was twitchy or turning too fast or like the front end was going to slide out or anything like that. It just stuck to the bitumen, held a really tight line, and I had a lot of confidence in the front end riding it on the range. Now, you know, obviously it wasn't a track, but you know, you can still get a good feel of the way the bike's going to handle on a range. Now, the one question I did want to know, the answer to, was how come this bike actually feels better and handles better with a 260 on the rear, which is not the standard tyre. So I got on the blower and I actually asked Joe Salter from Ride Dynamics that particular question.
The S7RR's got a trait of having too much rearward bias to it, like weight on the rear. And so over the years, we've found that raising the back of the motorcycle on that bike particularly really helps the thing steer a lot better mid-turn. So what you've effectively done is you've raised the back of the bike 8mm,
yeah,
which then transfers the weight balance of the motorcycle to the front of the motorcycle. Now, yes, it does steepen the head angle of the motorcycle a little bit as well and reduce your trail slightly. But when you look at the whole motorcycle from front to back, that 8mm raise at the very back of the motorcycle has only really changed your head angle by maybe 0.3 of a degree at best, and maybe reduced your trail a couple millimeters. Now, the BMW is inherently very stable motorcycle. That's also why it's also slower to steer and takes a little bit more lean angle to get through the middle of the corner.
yeah,
Because the strength of the BMW is acceleration and braking rather than mid-turn speed. So it hasn't lost too much stability or control because the bike's already very stable to start with.
yeah.
And so by raising the rear, you put more weight to the front, which speeds the steering up a little bit, and then it keeps the front turning better while you're on the table, particularly when you sort of go back to the throttle.
Wow. Is that, like this is the 2015, 2016 version. Is that inherent through all the models?
Generally, BMW have that trait, yes.
Okay.
Pretty much from, I mean, you and I have both done lots of laps on these S7RRs and the Superbike school as a coach.
Yeah.
They've had that trait since their inception, 2009, 2010 model, and they've gotten a lot better, but it's mainly due to tweaks to the frame flex rather than wholesale chassis changes or geometry changes through the years.
Yeah.
It kind of peaked out with the sort of 15 generation. That's kind of when they started getting it right or better. But the core traits there, and even to this current model that's out now, we find that you end up raising the rear or lowering the front, and the bike is better for it. So it's just a design philosophy, basically.
Yeah. Would that one last question? Is that going to be in, you know, the same across all different types of bikes and models? Because, you know, I remember riding a Triumph that someone had mucked around. They actually lowered it for the rider, And the guy brought it to me, and I had a ride, and you couldn't ride the thing. It was unsteerable. They dropped the front 10 mil
Yep.
down the forks, and
Yes.
then we just moved it back 10 mil, right? And it transformed the bike. So
Yep.
my question is this consistent across all bikes, or would, if you put a 260 on a different bike, you might have to change, the geometry or do something to the bike
Yep.
suspension?
Yeah, for sure. It is model specific.
Right.
Brands will generally have a ethos of how they build a motorcycle. Yamaha, for example, and Kawasaki are quite nervous and steep to start with. They're like, I'm referring to R1s, ZX10s, ZX6s, R6s.
Yeah.
They're race bikes first, road bike second. They build a race bike, put lights on it, and then they sell it to the market to get their money back. So their natural geometry is very steep and very aggressive to start with, a very high center of gravity, which suits road racing. For road bikes, we want a lower bike, but longer bike, so it's more stable for us. So generally, we don't like raising the rears of particularly R6s too much because it makes the thing steer slow, it makes it more nervous on the front, basically, because the bike doesn't want to turn in too well.
Yeah.
So putting a bigger tyre in the back's great, helps with in terms of the roll rate of the tyre, where it sort of rolls over on the radius of the tyre. Obviously, a taller, steeper sidewall to the tyre, the bike wants to flick in quicker.
Yeah.
It gives it a bigger footprint for drive grip, so there's advantages to it. But it can make the bike too steep, too nervous. And so you then end up raising the front of the motorcycle, dropping the forks through the clamps to get that balance back, or a bigger front tyre.
Yeah, right.
And that's how you achieve that. But going to say like a GSXR or a CBR, the BMW, they're inherently a bit more road focused or road friendly. And so they've got a bit of stability left over or in spades so that when we make that rear taller, it's not so bad.
Gotcha. Mate, thank you for your expertise, as usual.
No worries, mate.
Well, that's it from me. Listen, I hope you got something out of that. It was interesting to talk to Joe and get the information more specifically about the technical aspects of why it affected the bike in the way that it did. Like I said, I hope you got something out of that video, and I'm going to stick with the 260. I really like it, and it's perfect for this motorcycle. See you in another video. Bye.